So what was the tipping point that made you say, we really, really need to transform this? Was there a moment or was there a metric that just signaled this that we have to change right now?
We got a question from our CEO about what was going on with one of our vendors, and it took us, I think, 2.5 days to answer the question. And I was just kind of like low key horrified.
Oh my God, my hands would be sweating. You got it from the CEO, like,
Yeah.
and you're like, is it ready? You're like, you expect this to be ready today?
And I was accustomed to having an expectation that I should be able to answer that question in minutes if possible, or at least give an initial assessment on it. And I realized that because of our scale and complexity and because of the siloed data, we had to actually take the request, chop it up in pieces, send that out to some folks who then sent that out to more people in this kind of cascading effect. And then it all had to be rolled back up and checked and double checked and triple checked until we felt like we had a single answer to give back.
And that was the impetus. That was the moment you're like, something has to change in our
That was the
process.
moment. I was like, I already knew and we were already on that journey, but that was the moment that I felt it in my heart.
So why was it so slow? Was it just the siloed data? Was it the processes? What about that had to change?
Well, it was a combination both of some data and systems challenges as well as a cultural challenge. So, on the data and systems side, with the disparate systems we've talked about, right? The fragmentation, the siloing. But then on the cultural side, we also were in this mode of wanting to make sure that the answer was correct and needing lots and lots of layers of folks to have checked it. Because if some element was wrong, we were going to maybe blame somebody or someone would feel that they were in trouble, right? And so we had fallen into this culture where everything had to pass through the layers and come back through the layers. So we really honestly we had too many layers, and we had this fear of if we gave an imperfect answer that was going to become some kind of an issue and someone would be in trouble.
This failure, what did it teach you before we even get into the solution?
So I think two things. One was, okay, we've got to get to the point where we can answer questions like this very quickly, right? That's kind of tactical and practical. But secondly, I also realized that we had a lot of cultural work that we had to do as well, and that it was the problem maybe was going to be more of a cultural challenge than what I had originally estimated.
Can you tell me a little bit more about what you mean by the cultural challenge?
Yeah, I think that like all of us kind of know intellectually that when you go into a big transformation situation, you know that, hey, I've got data, I've got systems, I got tools, I got processes. You know those things are important. You also know, hey, I've got to do some change management, I've got some culture work to do. I think we underestimated the degree to which some of the way processes exist, or the reasons systems are the way they are, or the reasons data is still siloed. I think we underestimated the degree to which that is actually driven by cultural challenges.
So this cultural shift needed to happen. But did you think that you had to bring everyone in, the entire team in, to talk explicitly, this is a culture that has to change? Or were you thinking, let's implement a solution and that culture will shift by osmosis?
Probably a little bit of a combination of both, right? I think any of us, if somebody comes and says, hey, we need to change things, our first thought is kind of a mix of like curiosity and excitement, but also fear and
Yeah, of
nervousness, right?
course.
And, a lot of times we also think, hey, if I just put a system in place, that'll fix things, right? And that can be a big healing element in a journey. But it's really the combination of both of these things and starting down a path of iteration and experimentation where you just start to demonstrate that there's a different way to work, right? And we try to start to create a space where it's safe for people to try something new, for it to not always go well, to be able to pivot, and also to share with people what is the purpose of the change we're making and bring them on the journey with us.
So when did you find the solution, the procurement solution, and what was it and how did you get to it?
So we're still finding it. Okay. This is a journey. But we realized that the foundation data was everything, right? And we knew we had all the data that we needed. We just didn't really have it labeled the way it needed to be. It wasn't accessible. So we really started with the data piece. And to your prior point about getting it good enough, right? So we said, look, we need to be able to have this data. We need it to be democratized so that anyone who's got the appropriate access can see it. And so we started bringing our data into the enterprise data reporting environment that the company already had set up. We had not joined that. Some of it probably out of not knowing how to do that. Some of it maybe being nervous about sharing that data, right? Lots of reasons potentially. And we started working with our partners in the Chief Data Office and brought our data into that environment. And that was the start of it. And then once you've got some of this data in place, then it's easy to say, okay, the traditional way for me to expose this data would have been through a dashboard, which we have, which is wonderful. But also now I can use an assistant to be able to provide access to that data in a little bit easier, more authentic way and not force every one of my users to know how to navigate a dashboard. And that was really where we started. And then we've been building from there.
So you mentioned foundation data a little bit. And just for someone like me who's not in procurement, can you talk a little about what kind of data that you don't have to go into? I know it's a tremendous amount and very broad, but like generally, what kind of data are we talking about?
So think about your checkbook at home, right? Which is no longer a checkbook, right? But
My app.
metaphorically speaking, right? Your bank account. And in there is the names of folks that you have paid money to in the last year, right? So maybe there's your mortgage provider, maybe there's your favorite place to go for dinner and drinks in the middle of the week, right? So that's the first kind of data that we think about is here's the list of all the folks that we've paid and how much we paid them and on what date. That's a very key, rudimentary, fundamental type of procurement data. Another kind might be the list of all the purchase orders that have been issued, right? And then we can enrich that. How much of this purchase order has already been invoiced? How much of it's remaining? And you go through that. What's the list of all of our contracts, right? So it's simple concepts to start with that become complex as we enrich them. But we found the best way is to start with that simplest view. Like, what if I can just show you everyone you spent money with in the last 12 months? That's going to give you some insight right there.
Do you think this is a process that other enterprises can employ?
For sure.
All right. Do they have to start from step one? Do they have to simplify the data? Or are the new tools that we're building, are they going to be right away skipping all the pre-work?
Well, I don't know if you can skip all the pre-work. That sounded like a trick question to the teacher. That sounded like a little bit of a trap. I'm not sure. But I think that what we are trying to build is something that the other folks that we're working with, they can look at where are they at on their journey right now and figure out where to start. And you don't have to do a huge program. You don't have to get it all perfect before you can start. You can say, where are we right now? What is our number one need to be impactful and strategic to the business? And then let's start there.
But what's the process there? So you give this spiel to the client. You say, listen, you don't have to have all your data set up. We could use these tools and we could show you results like this. That's the play? Because we say we do it ourselves.
That's right. We do it ourselves. And I think one of the things that's important about these conversations is to listen, right? We need to listen to our customers, understand what it is that they need. And then we want to be able to say, okay, this is where you're at in your journey. This is what you think you need to be strategic in your C-suite today. Maybe getting a chance to be strategic means we fix some tactical problems. Maybe I need to attack the mid-tail spend or the tail, right? It depends. It differs in every single company. But we say, where do you need help? Where can we create enough benefit that we start that flywheel for growth, right? How do we peel up that kind of beginning, either investment in terms of either time or money that becomes a virtuous cycle?
So we started out talking how procurement is often seen as a cost center. Where do you see procurement going?
Well, I think procurement is one of the most strategic functions in a company because it is probably one of the only functions that is able to directly influence the margin, right? Because the work that we do both directly supports revenue and it also supports the cost base, and revenue minus cost equals margin, right? So we have a chance to play on both sides of that in the most simple terms, right? And it's far more complex than that, but I think that we have the opportunity to be the biggest margin expanders and to be able to create a source of funding to reinvest in a business to help it grow. Whether that's through acquisition, whether that is through new product development, right? Bringing in new tools, whatever those things are, it is probably one of the easiest places to get the additional monies we need for investment.